In this world, many children with sociopathic tendencies and a criminal charge sheet have been sent to prison. Yes, the people you're going to meet have traded their toys, crayons, and high school drama for handcuffs and a hideous orange jumpsuit. How did they end themselves in jail? Let's investigate the causes as we present the top 10 dangerous kids currently rotting in jail. Number 10. Aidan Caffey. Aidan Caffey's name will be eternally linked to a horrible tragedy that rocked the whole world. Aidan, born on the 26th of July 1991 in Texas, appeared to live a regular life in a small town. Her parents, Penny and Terry Caffey, and her two younger brothers, Matthew and Tyler, raised her in Alba, Texas. On the surface, their family seemed to be normal, but sinister forces were at work behind this facade. Aidan Caffey, at the early age of 16, embarked on a journey that would permanently affect her life and the lives of those around her. Aidan devised a heinous plot to escape her parents' stringent standards, fueled by her crush on Charlie Wilkinson and a desperate desire to avoid her parents' strict laws. Aidan, Charlie, and two of his buddies, Charles Wade and Bobby Johnson, snuck into the Caffey family house armed with firearms in the early hours of 1 March 2008. Their objectives were unsettling, to say the least. They attacked Aidan's family cruelly while they were sleeping. The savage assault took the life of Aidan's mother, Penny, and her two younger brothers, Matthew and Tyler. The sound of gunfire pierced the quiet, marking that dreadful night forever. Aidan's father, Terry, survived the attack despite several gunshot wounds. Aidan, once an innocent daughter and sister, was now a willing participant in an unimaginable act of violence. Aidan Caffey and her accomplices fled the scene following the horrible act, but their attempts to elude prosecution were short-lived. Soon enough, the gang was captured by police authorities and taken to face the repercussions of their crimes. Aidan was tried as an adult, despite her childhood owing to the gravity of the offense. She entered a guilty plea in court to 3 charges of capital crime. The weight of her guilt was clear, and the courtroom was filled with awe when the details of the crime were revealed. Finally, the judge imposed a sentence commensurate with the seriousness of the offense committed. Aidan Caffey received 2 consecutive life sentences with no chance of release. She was also sentenced to an extra 25 years in prison for her participation in the attempted crime of her father, Terry. The case of Aidan Caffey continues to attract public attention, prompting many to wonder what motivated such a heinous crime. The extent to which her lover, Charlie Wilkinson, influenced her, as well as the psychological aspects that may have led to her readiness to engage in taking the lives of her own family, are being debated. Aidan is still jailed, locked to the confines of a prison cell, and her life is permanently altered by the decisions she made. Number 9. Antonio Barbeau. Antonio Barbeau was one of 2 teenagers accused of a horrible crime that claimed the life of an elderly woman. Back in September 2012, the horrifying circumstances of the crime shook the little hamlet of Sheboygan Falls. Barbeau had brutally taken the life of his 28-year-old great-grandmother, Barbara Olson, in her own home with a hammer and a hatchet. Barbeau made a startling judgment that sent shockwaves across the courtroom. He pled not guilty to first-degree intentional homicide after months of court hearings and investigation. This meant that he accepted the conviction without admitting guilt, changing his plea from not guilty by reason of mental illness to guilty by reason of mental illness. This unanticipated turn of events was part of a plea deal that would have long-term consequences for him. Barbeau struggled to show regret throughout the sentencing hearing. As he stood before the judge and sought to address the court, the weight of his deeds weighed heavily on him. His emotions were plainly suppressed, yet they overtook him and caused him to slip and falter. Recognizing the seriousness of his client's predicament, Barbeau's defense lawyer intervened and gave the remainder of his client's statement on his behalf. "I am aware that I have difficulty expressing my emotions. I'm not sure why, but that doesn't mean I'm not sorry. I took the mother, grandmother, sister, or friend of someone. I didn't have the authority to do so. I've ruined so many people's lives because of one decision I made." Barbeau wept as the lawyer read his statement. Overwhelmed by his punishment, he lay his head on the desk, expressing his anguish at realizing how much he had wrecked his own and others' lives. Following the trial, Barbeau's difficult past was revealed by a doctor. They discovered that cognitive deficits caused by a traumatic incident he had when he was just 10 years old may have impacted his behavior. Barbeau's life was altered forever when he was hit by a car at such a young age, affecting his fate and molding his following decisions. The verdict was delivered solemnly by the judge. Antonio Barbeau was sentenced to life in prison with the option of parole after 36 years. The seriousness of the punishment hung thick in the air as the weight of those words dropped over the courtroom. While Barbeau was given a glimpse of hope for freedom, it was a far-off vision, arriving only in 2048. Number 8. Sierra Halseth. Sierra Halseth's career began as a good student with a bright future, but it took a dark turn when she became engaged in a horrible act that shocked the town. Sierra Halseth was born in 2001 in Las Vegas, Nevada, to a loving and prosperous family. She excelled academically and demonstrated great abilities in a variety of extracurricular activities. Halseth immediately achieved popularity among her peers and was viewed as a role model for other pupils due to her brilliance and charisma. She was interested in community service and had a bright future ahead of her. However, Halseth's life took a drastic turn on May 2021 when word leaked of her involvement in a heinous crime. Halseth was accused of taking the life of her own father with the help of her lover, Aidan Guerrero, at the age of 16. The motivation for the crime was at first unknown, but as the inquiry progressed, a grim picture formed. According to reports, Halseth and Guerrero methodically organized the crime in order to disguise their traces and make the crime look natural. They reportedly utilized tools and equipment to commit the crime, leaving a horrible sight in their wake. The terrible nature of the crime sent shockwaves across the town, leaving friends, relatives, and neighbors befuddled and in mourning. Sierra Halseth and Aidan Guerrero were captured and charged on October 2021. Surveillance footage, text messages, and witness testimony were among the overwhelming evidence presented against them. The subsequent trial exposed a frightening network of deception, manipulation, and malevolent objectives. Both defendants were characterized as cold-hearted persons who plotted to take someone's life for selfish benefit. Sierra Halseth eventually pled guilty to the allegations against her, accepting a plea bargain that saved her from a life sentence without the chance of parole. She was sentenced to 25 years to life in prison in January 2022, with the possibility of release after serving a minimum of 10 years. Her age, lack of past criminal history, and the plea agreement she agreed to all factored towards the punishment. The public's reaction to Halseth's punishment varied. Some believed that the sentence was too light, given the awful nature of the act. Others thought her age and ability for recovery justified a second opportunity. Sierra Halseth is currently jailed, serving her term and dealing with the repercussions of her decisions. Number 7. James Fairweather. James Fairweather's name became synonymous with horrible atrocities that shocked the neighborhood and sent shockwaves across the country. Fairweather was born on the 17th of May, 1998 in Colchester, Essex, and his upbringing gave little clue of the terrible route he would later take. Fairweather's background was rather average since he grew up in a middle-class home with no obvious indicators of difficulty or aggressive inclinations. However, as he approached his adolescence, a terrible metamorphosis occurred within him. Fairweather began to show indications of mental instability, including a fixation with sacrifice and violence. He retreated from social activities, exhibiting more unpredictable behavior that alarmed his peers and family members. Fairweather's disordered mind spiraled out of control in 2014, causing him to perpetrate a series of heinous atrocities that would permanently tarnish his name. He went on a horrific crime spree while he was just 15 years old, sending shockwaves throughout Colchester town. His victims, James Atfield and Nahid Almanea, were viciously assaulted and stabbed in separate events, leaving the neighborhood in terror. Fairweather's actions were conducted with chilling premeditation and brutality. He painstakingly planned his attacks, targeting vulnerable people in remote areas, emphasizing the deliberate nature of his activities. Fairweather's method of operation comprised stalking, overpowering, and viciously taking the life of his victims. The ferocity and senselessness of his acts sent shockwaves not only in Britain, but also in Saudi Arabia, prompting a massive manhunt. James Fairweather was captured after a thorough investigation, and the breadth of his troubling deeds was revealed at his trial. The court heard horrifying information about his infatuation with serial criminals, his preoccupation with sacrifice, and his desire to replicate the heinous crimes of those he idolized. The evidence against him was overwhelming, and there was no doubt about his guilt. Fairweather suffered the repercussions of his heinous deeds when he was sentenced to life in prison in 2016. Given the gravity of the crimes and the irreparable suffering done to the victims' families, the judge concluded that Fairweather should spend a minimum of 27 years before being eligible for parole. The punishment was designed to guarantee that he faced the full weight of his conduct and that he did not do additional harm to society. Fairweather's imprisonment served as a reminder of the devastation that violent acts may inflict on people and communities across the world. Number 6. Nehemiah Grigo. At the early age of 15, a boy named Nehemiah Grigo did an unthinkable deed that forever ruined the basis of his family. In a heinous crime that took place in October 2015, he took the life of his parents and 3 younger siblings, subjecting them to a vicious attack with 2 different weapons. The magnitude of his actions sent shockwaves throughout the neighborhood, leaving everyone stunned. Recognizing the seriousness of his actions, Nehemiah boldly pled guilty to his role in the tragic event. Initially, a family court judge requested a sentence commensurate with his age, citing his youth at the time of the offense. However, the previous judgment was reversed in 2019, and Nehemiah was sentenced as an adult. During his imprisonment, he elected to collaborate with the police without the presence of a lawyer. Nehemiah said during his honest confession that his actions were driven by a strong loathing for his mother. The heinousness of the act, along with the existence of several victims, merited a jail term of up to 120 years. Finally, Nehemiah was sentenced to 3 consecutive life sentences, with credit for the 6 years and 285 days he had previously served. This meant he'd have to serve at least 30 years in prison before becoming eligible for parole. Nehemiah stood silently as the sentence was read out in a courtroom packed with passion, his stoicism disguising his deep sorrow. He did, however, pause to express sorrow and apologize to his family. According to reports from the ceremonies, Nehemiah was soft-spoken and sincerely moved. This portrayal contributed to the tragedy's complexities, raising issues about society's comprehension of the fundamental reasons for such horrible crimes. He apologized for taking the lives of his parents and siblings, saying, "I wish I could take it back, but the reality is that I can't." The depths of Nehemiah's agony and the psychological factors that caused him to conduct such a horrific deed are impossible to grasp. Nonetheless, his apologies hinted at his grief for the irreparable damage he caused. His sister described Nehemiah as a tough youngster to raise and emphasized the importance of keeping him locked up. She stated that 5 years was insufficient time for him to improve. The story of Nehemiah is a striking reminder of how unpredictable human behavior can be. Number 5. Roxanna Sikorski. The suspense in the courtroom was evident as the destiny of Roxanna Sikorski hung in the balance. It was a day of reckoning for the young girl who had planned with her adult lover to perpetrate a horrific crime against her own family. The circumstances that led up to this important moment began in October 2014, when Roxanna, then 15 years old, awoke in the middle of the night with a terrifying thought. She had attempted to take the life of her younger brother, consumed by a twisted desire to harm her parents and brothers. Fortunately, her scheme was foiled, and her family survived. Roxanna's mother, Laureen Sikorski, found the fortitude to address the court before the judge began reading the punishment. She made an emotional plea for sympathy on behalf of her adoptive daughter, expressing her conflicted emotions. Laureen emphasized that Roxanna needed continuing psychological help. Laureen contended that sentencing her as an adult and exposing her to the harsh reality of jail would simply destroy her already delicate world. Roxanna's adoptive father, Jeffrey, mirrored Laureen's worries, expressing fear for his daughter's safety in an adult penitentiary. He presented her as a young, fragile child caught in the web of evil. The courtroom debated the case's complexities, delving into Roxanna's tragic background. She was diagnosed with reactive attachment disorder as a youngster, a mental disease that inhibits the capacity to build emotional ties with main carers. This discovery offered additional insight into the atrocities that occurred. Roxanna exhibited real regret in court, apologizing to her parents for not being the daughter they had hoped for. The seriousness of her acts had finally dawned on her, and she was now fully aware of the consequences. Meanwhile, Roxanna's adult accomplice, who had backed and enabled the conspiracy to take the life of her whole family, had already received a life sentence after being found guilty on all 7 counts. Despite the fact that Roxanna was clearly involved in the crime, her age and problematic past obliged the court to consider the possibilities of rehabilitation and atonement. As a result, Roxanna was sentenced to 10 to 20 years in jail, a significant amount of her young life. The court ruled that she had committed a heinous act and that she must face the consequences. This judgment also functioned as a deterrence, sending a message to other young people who might consider breaching the law or harming others. Number 4. Conrad Shafer. A 15-year-old teenager named Conrad Shafer went on a violent shooting rampage, leaving a trail of damage and taking the lives of innocent people in a terrible and horrible episode that devastated the city of Kissimmee, Florida. The motivations for these horrible deeds were suddenly shown to be rooted in a bizarre sense of enjoyment. Conrad Shafer, joined by his companion David Damas, went on a violent binge, carrying out a series of shootings that took the life of 2 people. While waiting for a bus, 17-year-old David Guerrero was ruthlessly attacked. The cruelty and callousness displayed by these adolescents shocked the community and left it in sadness for the loss of innocent lives. Authorities were able to trace the origins of the weapon used in these heinous acts thanks to their investigations. Lothar Shafer, Conrad Shafer's father, had acquired a gun for his son just 1 day before the crime rampage began. Lothar Shafer was facing criminal charges for not only allowing his son access to the pistol, but also enabling him to possess hundreds of rounds of ammunition. The catastrophic repercussions of his actions have left the community reeling with grief and rage. Legal actions were initiated, and those responsible for the shootings were brought to justice. Conrad Shafer admitted to 2 counts of first degree. Despite the fact that a 40-year jail sentence was on the table, the court finally handed down 2 consecutive life sentences, guaranteeing that Shafer would spend the remainder of his life in prison. His attempts to convey sorrow and apologize to the victims' families fell tragically short, since his words could never heal the agony and misery he inflicted. In the aftermath of the catastrophe, the victims' relatives struggled with their own grief and resentment. Some people were deeply disappointed by Shafer's apology, saying it was weak and inadequate. Dolores Horn, the aunt of one of the victims, expressed her wish to make Shafer genuinely understand the misery her nephew had gone through. The community, still looking for explanations and grappling with the terrible carnage, sought consolation in the thought that Shafer would be removed from society, ensuring their protection. During the trial, Shafer's mother testified that her son's childhood battle with leukemia had hardened him and increased his fury. While these discoveries shed light on Shafer's problematic history, they do not justify or excuse his violent actions. Lothar Shafer, the father, suffered the repercussions of his participation in giving his son the crime weapon in a separate legal action. He pled not guilty to a firearms charge and was sentenced to 4 months in prison and 2 years on probation. Number 3. Aidan Fucci. Aidan Fucci made headlines in 2021 after being arrested and charged with taking the life of Tristan Bailey, a 13-year-old girl from St. Johns County, Florida. Because of the terrible nature of the crime and the ages of the individuals involved, the case shook the community and received considerable publicity. At the time of the incident, Aidan Fucci was a teenager residing in St. Johns County, Florida. He, like many teens, most certainly had a social network, went to school, and had interests and hobbies. Aidan Fucci and his victim, Tristan Bailey, on the other hand, had mutual acquaintances and were frequently spotted hanging out together. The incident occurred on May 2021, when the corpse of Tristan Bailey was discovered in a forested location. Tristan passed away as a consequence of a violent attack, according to an investigation started by the St. Johns County Sheriff's Office. Aidan Fucci was eventually caught and charged as an adult with first-degree premeditated crime. The case drew national attention when evidence indicated that Tristan Bailey had been stabbed 114 times. Aidan Fucci, the culprit, was just 14 years old at the time of the incident, but was prosecuted as an adult. Fucci's sentence, which ranged from 40 years to life in prison, was determined in the courtroom of Judge R. Lee Smith. However, because he was a minor, his guilty plea for first-degree crime did not qualify him to give his own life as capital punishment. Judge Smith stated his determination to reach a sentencing judgment as soon as possible in order to prevent unnecessary delays. "I'm not going to drag this out any longer than necessary," he said. "I don't want to go through a sentencing hearing only to say, 'All right, now I'm going to take 3 weeks.'" On the 24th of March, 2003, Judge Lee Smith sentenced 16-year-old Aidan Fucci to life in prison in a St. Johns County courthouse for taking the life of Tristan Bailey. Fucci's mother, Crystal Smith, was also proven to have been implicated in the illegal conduct as well. She amended her plea from not guilty to no contest, in connection with allegations of evidence tampering in her son's case. Crystal Smith was accused by authorities of cleaning a pair of bloodied pants that her son had worn after the incident. Crystal Smith pled not guilty to a third-degree felony charge of tampering with evidence as part of the plea bargain. The maximum penalty for this offense is 5 years in jail. She was found guilty and sentenced to 5 years probation by the judge. She was also sentenced to 30 days in the St. Johns County Jail, with credit for 1 day previously spent. Number 2. Philip Chisholm. Despite being just 14 years old at the time, Philip Chisholm committed a horrible crime that culminated in a life term in jail. At Danvers High School, he assaulted and took the life of his own maths teacher, Colleen Ritzer. When delivering the punishment, Salem Superior Court Judge David Lowy described Chisholm as brutal and senseless. He praised Ritzer's modest heroism and emphasized that the consequences of this tragedy will never be forgotten. Ritzer's mother, father, brother, sister, and friends all spoke in court, expressing their memories of the beloved maths teacher and the anguish that her passing away had caused. "Our world came to an abrupt halt in that very moment," said Colleen Ritzer's father, Tom Ritzer. "Colleen was completely innocent, and she did not deserve any of this. Put this beast behind bars," urged the victim's brother, Dan Ritzer. Colleen's mother, Peggy Ritzer, concluded the first portion of the session with a 32-minute speech in which she described her final recollections of her daughter and the grief their family has faced living without her. "The gaping hole in our lives will never be filled," Peggy Ritzer, Colleen Ritzer's mother, spoke while Philip Chisholm stood still in court. Peggy Ritzer also called for Chisholm to get capital punishment, but admitted that's not an option under Massachusetts law. "He is pure evil, and pure evil can never be rehabilitated," she told the court. During the trial, Chisholm's defense attorney claimed that he had a mental disorder, but the jury rejected this claim. As a result, he received a life sentence with the chance of release after 25 years. Chisholm also received a concurrent 40-year sentence on assault and robbery offenses. Diane Chisholm, Chisholm's mother, wept silently during the sentence and apologized to the Ritzer family for her son's conduct. Chisholm, on the other hand, appeared before the judge with a poker face, showing no emotion and exhibiting no regret for his acts. Chisholm's mother made a brief remark prior to the sentencing hearing on Friday. "Words cannot express how much pain and sorrow I have experienced over the last 2.5 years. No one, however, has suffered more than the Ritzer family. My deepest gratitude, prayers, and humble respect are with them today as they continue their healing journey," Diana Chisholm wrote. The story of Philip Chisholm serves as a sobering reminder of the disturbing truth that people as young as 14 can commit horrible crimes. Chisholm is currently serving a 40-year-to-life term at the Sousa Baranowski Correctional Center in Shirley for the assault, robbery, and taking the life of Colleen Ritzer. The magnitude of his acts, as well as the irrevocable loss experienced by the Ritzer family, has resulted in a lengthy jail sentence. Number 1. Caleb Sharp. Caleb Sharp was convicted in 2017 for taking the life of a classmate and wounding 3 others during the Spokane shooting. Sharp took an AR-15 weapon and a pistol, as well as multiple boxes of ammo, aboard his school bus on the day of the shootings. Sharp went straight to a second-floor corridor at school, where he dumped the duffel bag and removed the assault weapon. A classmate named Strahan approached Sharp as he attempted to load the weapon. He began loading the rifle, which jammed, Strahan allegedly told Sharp. "I always knew you were going to shoot up the school. You know that is going to get you in trouble." Sharp then assaulted Strahan, who stood bravely. Sharp tossed the revolver down after firing into the crowd. Custodian Joe Bowen accosted him at this moment. As Bowen approached, Sharp lifted his hands over his head in surrender. On the day of the sentence, the courtroom was packed, with over 200 people in attendance. Many of them, greatly impacted by the incident, came out to offer their impact statements. Their united cries rang out as they begged Judge Price to punish Sharp harshly for his horrible deeds. As the trials progressed, Sharp's defense counsel pleaded for a 20-year sentence. In contrast, given the seriousness of the offense, the prosecution advocated for a 35-year to life sentence. Judge Price decided on a 40-year sentence after careful consideration of the nature of the offense and the long-term impact it had on the victims and their families. Caleb Sharp, the man responsible for a terrible school shooting in Washington state, showed sorrow and apologized to his victims before being sentenced. Despite defense counsel's requests for a shorter sentence, Judge Michael Price imposed a term that was twice as long. Sharp apologized to the entire community, expressing regret for the sleepless nights he had imposed on them. Furthermore, he addressed his 3 injured victims and Amy Strahan, the mother of 15-year-old Sam Strahan, who unfortunately died in the incident. Sharp apologized for causing Amy and Emily distress and expressed tremendous regret for taking Sam away from them. He declared that he had no evil in his heart and accepted that no amount of penance could totally atone for the lives he harmed while humbly asking pardon. Amy Strahan and the 3 wounded girls made their own comments the day before Sharp's, all pushing for the maximum prison term of 45 years. Sharp received credit for the 5 years he had already served in jail prior to the trial, in addition to the term issued. This credit recognizes the time he has already spent, decreasing the total term of his incarceration. Thanks for watching, and we hope you enjoyed this video. We'll see you in the next one.